Now what we're going to do is learn a little bit about proportioning. The first thing we're going to do is lay the thread right on the hook. We're going to divide the hook in half. Again, we've got the hook shank right there. Again, right up from the barb, that's a hook shank. We're going to lay it halfway in between there. It's going to become very important for our next flies that we're going to be tying, how our proportioning is. Now we're going to wrap right up to the barb, right straight from there. Now, what we're going to do is put on a tail. Now we put a tail on with a woolly bugger, and we're going to use something a little exotic. In fact, one of my favorite animals on earth, that's a golden pheasant. And they have little tippets around their neck, and it just looks good. Okay, here's the golden pheasant tippet. Now we're just going to use a few fibers from it, and we're just going to reach up right here and trim it. And we've got the fibers, and we don't want them to get away from us. Now again, we're going to lay our left hand right on the vise. We're going to measure so it's about the length of the shank. We're going to come up to the halfway point and trim. This is so important to learn how to do. Lay your scissors right on it, halfway point, and trim. Now, or again, if we have to pinch our thread, that's okay, and then bring it in. Make sure it stays on top and wrap real slowly so it ends up right here. This is going to help you when you start putting on flies with wings to learn this proportioning, so I'm going to hammer you pretty hard about that. All right, now we've wrapped that, and we have our pheasant tippets. A lot of times on these trudes, you really don't need much of a tail, and you can even leave this off if you want to, or you can make it a little shorter. But I want you to understand in most fly tying, the tail is the length of the shank. Proportioning is really important on how a fly balances out on the water. The next step that we're going to learn, it's going to be a fun one. It's called dubbing. Ah, yes, dubbing. We're going to use some dubbing material. We're going to use some Antron. It's not the easiest dubbing to learn at first, but there is a rule. You will find out the more that you tie is you dub with thin dubbing. You don't make it thick. Little is better than a lot. Now what we're going to do, especially when you get started, is to probably put a little wax on the thread. Your wax thread is not going to do you much good. So we're going to take some wax and just wax the thread a little bit. As you get better at this, you may not need wax. There's always a school of thought. Some tyers don't like it because it sticks to tools. But when you first start dubbing Antron, which will really make this fly effective, you'll want to put wax on. Now here's the first step. I'm going to put some in my right hand, and I'm going to take my left thumb and finger, just like this, and pull some of it out of the glob, you might call it. Just a little bit, just like that. See how that is? And what we're going to do then is take the thumb and finger, and you may want to lick your finger a little bit. And then we're going to twist it forward towards us, just like that. One way. Now that's kind of the first step. But now a lot of you are going to be right here, which is not where you want to be. So just pull it down a little bit. One thing you're going to notice, and you want to be back here at the start of the body. Now I just got a little bit on the thread, and I'm going to wrap it forward. And I'm going to look and see if I have enough. And I'm going to build it up. Oh, I'm building it up, looking good. Oh, ran out. Guess what? I have some more in my hand. Now I may have to add a little bit more wax. But if you get too much, it's going to bulk up like this, and it's going to want to come off. And that's why it's always better to try a little bit. Again, forward. And we're working our way to the front. Now, we still have some thread there. So we want to cover that thread, which will give us halfway down the shank. We're going to add a little bit more. I find on Antron, I always like to lick my fingers. Helps give me a little bit more tension. There we, oh, got too much. Don't hesitate just to pull it off and tie it off. We'll just cut a little of that off. And we now have a dubbed lime body. Now, on a trude, do you have to have a lime trude? No. You have in your kit some peacock. You can have a peacock bodied trude. You could have a gray bodied trude. whatever you want it to be. It'll be great. Just use your creativity. In fact, one of the favorites of one of my guides is pink. Believe it or not, pink. Also, purple. Don't understand a purple dry fly, but it works. Okay, now we're ready for the next step on a material that you've got a big chunk. You got a calf tail. Calf tail is one of the most agreeable materials to work with, and it gives you visibility, and it floats, and it helps catch fish, and that's most important. In your calf tail, and I've got one here that I've used quite a bit of. You can see, you might say, wow, boy, you really do use a lot of it. I do. Right now you have a calf tail in the kit, but as you buy calf tail, you're going to find that you're going to look for the straighter the calf tail, the better when you buy. And it doesn't hurt to go through a whole bunch of calf tails. Even if they're in a bag, ask the clerk if you can open it up and look at the material. You want it nice and straight, no matter what fly you're going to use. Now, something you're going to see is calf body hair. Now, calf body hair really is nice and straight, but it's very thick and air won't pass through it as well. It's good on real small flies where air passing through is not a problem. Now, you might say, what's the problem with air passing through? Well, it'll twist your leader because air won't pass through it. It'll cause the fly to twist around. So this is why we use a lot of calf tail, because it has a thinner fiber. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is how much should I use? Well, what I tell people is go to the gap of the hook and measure. And if it kind of fits in the gap of the hook, that's going to be just about right. Now, this is one of the first steps you might as well learn right from the start. I call it hand stacking. We're going to take our fingers, grip it, bring it over, set it back on top. What we're doing is getting rid of a lot of the smaller fibers. Now, at first, this is going to be a little difficult for you. We're going to bring it around. And now, when I hold on right here, now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull out some of this stuff. Look at that come out. We want to get it all nice, even, and straight. Well, guess what? Calf body hair may be that way, but calf tail isn't. Now, once we do that enough times, we're ready to go to a stacker. Now, there's all kinds of stackers available. And what I like is just to have any of it. It's really not a particular preference over one over the other, but you want to have it big enough, wide enough that it's easy to put the materials in. Now I'm going to tap it down just like this, like that. And then I do it a little bit different than a lot of people. I put my thumb on top and right between my fingers like this. And what we're going to do is hit it down on, well, we got this nice desk here. Move my bobbin out of the way. Come in. I'm sure your wife or your husband is going to go to the door when you start tying flies thinking that somebody's there, but he or she will be thinking that you're tying some great flies for him. So, all right, now here we go. Let's go up here. We'll pull this out. Oh, look at that, and how nice and even that is. It's not as important on this particular fly that we're doing right now as it will be on some of the other flies that we're going to tie, like the Royal Wolf and the Parachute Adams. Now, look at this, how nice that looks compared to when we started. Now, where should we be on this fly with the end of the hair? Well, first of all, let's see if we got enough. Well, it should fit right in there. If it's twice this size, then you got to go back and pull some of it out. And what I do is I pull it right out from the ends. I can make it a little thinner by doing that. Don't start, this stuff's too expensive to throw it away. Okay, now we're ready to go. Now I'm going to go on this fly to kind of the bend of the hook right here, and then go about where in between where this is, where the black tip's here and the black tip there, and so that it just kind of goes right between the two of them. All right, now we're going to lay it right on top. We're going to switch hands now. Now we're going to come up and we're going to cut it kind of at an angle like this, and then come under like that. And now we're going to take our thumb and finger and tilt it forward and just get a couple little wraps of thread around it. Now it should stay right up on top, just like that. Before we do anything else, wrap any more wraps. Now I'm going to be using a light thread, more than likely an 8/0 thread, so that I can get a lot of wraps without bulk. But I'm just going to hit just a tiny bit of cement. That's going to go inside the calf tail, the butts of the calf tail, and we're going to tie it in. Look at that. I hope that your fly that you're tying with me right now looks exactly like that. Proportioning is so important. Your body should be halfway down the shank, and you're going to be halfway at this point. Now we're going to wrap hackle, and this is just an easy way of getting started wrapping hackle. And we're gonna use a saddle. We have a nice brown saddle here. The saddle gives you a lot of options. It's going to be long enough. Not that you couldn't use neck hackle. Neck hackle is going to be just fine. But the saddle allows you just to wrap one saddle. Now, coming up a little later on, you're going to wrap 2 saddles at once to give you a nice thick hackle. But on this fly, the important thing is to look for, we want a nice thick hackle, but not too thick. And we're going to look at proportioning. We want it to be 1 gap right here and a half, so it should be about right here. And we measure that by going like this. Now a little bit later on, we're going to show you a hackle gauge. That's in the materials section with Scotty. And that hackle gauge will help you gauge your hackle. Okay, now we're going to tie this on. And we're going to rotate our thumb in, just like this. Lay it right on the vise, rotate it in, make a loop, and tie it so it's just slightly on the other side. Now notice that you can see a little bit of that calf tail. I'm going to trim that stem. Remember, we have our stem. Notice how I trimmed out all this fluffy part. Now we're going to take our thread and wrap it right to there, right by the eye. We're leaving a little bit of room. One of the biggest problems with people when they first start tying flies is they end up crowding the head. And we're going to make sure right off the bat you learn how not to do that. First thing we're going to do is pull our hackle. Glossy side again is to the back. This is called dry fly style of tying. Now, when we tied the woolly bugger, we tied it wet fly style. Okay, here we go. We're going to wrap straight up and straight down. Go up and down. Now as I pull the hackle back after each time that I wrap up and back down. Now one of the beautiful things about this Trude pattern is that it can be used both as a wet fly and a dry fly, because you can fish it under the surface. Now notice how I'm moving progressively forward with this, as tight as I can. Now you want to keep going forward. You don't want to wrap over the hackle. Now if you would want to make it thicker, you could use 2 wraps of hackle. Say that you're going to be fishing the Madison River and you want a fly that floats a little bit better, you'll want to wrap maybe 2 wraps of hackle. Or you may want to change and have a grizzly and maybe mix 2 different colors together. That's kind of up to you. Now we're ready to tie it off. Again, I'm using the rotary plier. Now what we're going to do is, again, switch hands, go underneath, and tie it off. Now I'm going to pull back on this hackle as I wrap, so I don't wrap some of the hackles under. This is again, now notice how much room there is to the eye. If you're right up on the eye, right here, and you're blocking that eye, you're in trouble. Because you know what's going to happen? You're not going to be able, so much material and thread's going to wrap over that eye, you won't be able to get the leader through. But notice the proportioning on this fly. Now we're going to do our whip finish. And again, you may not be quite proficient at it yet. You may want to use your half hitch to just secure it. Here we go. Again, facing us, making the hook grab the thread from the eye, forming our triangle. Now right here you're going to have a little problem because you're going to start gathering up some material, so you kind of got to be careful about that. And you work your way around the materials, and if you catch a few hackles, you can trim them out. Make sure you don't have anything underneath the eye. You want to keep the materials tied down at the top if you accidentally make